Well, kia ora, and welcome to a pop-up version of the Hoon to Max Rashbrooke from the Institute for Democratic and Economic Analysis. Max, lovely to have you on the show.
It's great to be here, Bernard. Thanks.
What could you tell us what you've produced in this big new report and why you've chosen this topic first?
Yeah, so we decided to talk about welfare to work policy, active labour market policy first up, because we're a think tank that's devoted to tackling poverty and political exclusion, and obviously helping people move off welfare into paid work can be a really big part of improving people's living standards and reducing poverty and economic exclusion. And it also felt like a really important subject to tackle. It's not, I mean, I've been struck by how little gets written about it, how little it's been studied. It's a hugely important area of policy for individuals, for the economy, and it's just not one that we give the attention that it deserves.
Yeah, you've done a great job of framing the issue. We have 400,000 people who are not in work. Either they're on a job seeker support benefit or one of the other main benefits. And you've done some great research, and you have a great chart here showing how much New Zealand spends in helping to get people who aren't working into work. And for me, it was a bit surprising to see we're barely at 0.2% of GDP on these active labour force programs. And that's well below the OECD average of over 0.4%. What sort of things could we do to lift ourselves, basically double the amount that we spend on this?
Yeah, it's really striking because there's so many programs there's so many things you can do in this space, and other countries do a much better job than we do, of providing wraparound mental and health support, providing, wage subsidies, of investing in vocational education and all these things. And yeah, they invest twice as much as we do on average at that really crucial moment in a person's life where they're looking to make that step from welfare and into paid work. I mean, in terms of what we're talking about, there's some big ideas in the report. I mean, our view is that if you've got young people who've been unemployed for a year or more, we should be just finding them a job placement, to break that cycle of unemployment and low prospects. And we talk about how you could do that. And there's a few other ideas. But one of the most fundamental things that I discovered during the research, actually an MSD official sort of off the record said to me, which was that before we start designing lots of new programs that could help job seekers, we have to confront a much more fundamental issue, which is that work and income, by and large, doesn't know what people need because, they're not taking the time to get to know people, and they're under huge pressure to just push people into the first job that comes their way, which doesn't work for them. It doesn't work for businesses who get all these totally unsuitable applicants, and it's just incredibly wasteful. But that's how the system is set up at the moment.
So one of the ideas is a circuit breaker job guarantee. How would that work, and where has it worked elsewhere?
Yeah, so that's the idea that if you've got young people who've been unemployed for quite a long period of time, you want to guarantee that there's something positive in their life related to work, and so you basically say, look, we'll find you a work placement, and it might be for 6 months or 12 months or whatever. And that could be we'll place you with a private employer, but it could be that the public sector creates the job, or it basically funds councils or NGOs to find work placements for people. And and so what's happening then is that young person, they've got something positive in their life, they're going to work, they've got something on their CV, they're building work habits and skills, and those sorts of schemes are used in the UK and in Europe, and they have really big impacts. Like the British version of this, the young people who went through it were 27% more likely to be in permanent private sector employment a few years after doing the program than their peers who had not been through that kind of program. And it's the power of just in it, when things are really desperate, the state stepping in and saying, look, we've got your back, we'll make sure that we're going to break that cycle of negative outcomes.
And what about this idea here of putting together a launching pad for employment and and entrepreneurship that it's been used in the States. You've got an idea here of building a launch pad for people to create solidarity within and between people who are unemployed.
Yeah, and that's another thing that came from reading some really inspiring overseas examples. And the thing that really strikes out is that it can be an incredibly lonely experience being a job seeker, particularly being long-term unemployed. And we heard that from the conversations that we had directly with people who are in that situation. And what the launching pads do is they bring together about 20 job seekers of really different ages and experiences and ethnicities. And under the supervision of a highly trained job coach, they come together and they start to build a bit of solidarity and share their experiences and share life lessons. And, and I think and building that supportive environment is incredibly powerful. And then those launching pads, as they're called, those groups, they start to work out with each other, what are the things we need to work on? Where are our skills deficits? And they start to address that, and they build plans for getting into employment, and they start to activate those plans. And these are not hugely expensive things. I mean, the cost of running one of these launching pads is about 40,000 euros, so rough in the ballpark of $100,000 if you allow for a bit of inflation. And again, incredible outcomes. People who go through them are, like, if the average person is, beneficiary has about a 40% chance of getting into work, these people have a 60% chance. It's really transformative, and it comes from building that solidarity, which I think is so important.
And in Europe, similar types of things have certainly improved the chances of getting jobs. And these sorts of things, the jobs guarantee and the launch pad, how do they sort of pay for themselves, if you like, in terms of reducing churn rates, reducing issues with health, mental health, and then reducing the scarring that you often get with unemployment?
Yeah, there's so many sort of positive impacts they have, and and of course you don't have to do this for all job seekers. There's a whole tranche of people who will just move in out of the labour market and they'll find jobs for themselves, and that's great. We're talking here about people often who've got real barriers, and it can be poor physical and mental health, or poor skills, or lack of self-confidence, or all sorts of other things. So you really need, and we're all better off if you invest in people at that moment in their lives. And like internationally, so, going through one of these schemes, on average lifts people's employment rates by in the region of 10%, lifts their earnings on average by 17%, in the big picture level, really high level spending on these issues, has a very significant downward pressure on unemployment. And so you're getting people into work, so you're reducing the benefit bill, you're increasing the tax that people pay, and then you've got all the flow on positive effects. We know that it's good for people's mental health and their physical health to be in employment. And even the current government, which isn't particularly fond of spending money, in the budget they put $340 million aside for these to continue Labor's previous programs in this area. And then right underneath that in the budget, there was a savings line of $140 million just in the first 4 years from these programs, and just the savings from not paying benefits. So they weren't even calculating the extra tax paid or the flow on mental and physical health effects. So if you add those into the calculation, and that's some of the work that we want to do in the next phase of this research, you start to see that these are absolutely programs that pay for themselves over, not too great a period.
Max Rashbrooke from the Institute for sorry, hang on a sec. Max Rashbrooke from the Institute for Democratic and Economic Analysis with their first report, The Pipeline of Potential, How New Zealand Can Better Connect Businesses with Untapped Local Talent. We'll put links into the show notes for those reports. Max, thank you very much for being in a pop-up version of the Hoon on the Kaka.
Thanks for the interest, Bernard.